The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language.
Shall we begin?
Smiley is suspicious, Percy.
You won't know who to trust. Let's begin.
Welcome back, fellow Spy Nerds, to the Spies Like Us podcast. That is, of course, the podcast where we discuss the tradecraft of from screens large and small. I'm Todd.
I'm Fred. Hi, Spy Nerds.
Yes, hello, nerds. Fred, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about A Spy Among Friends. Probably the greatest spy story ever. John le Carré did a fictionalized version of it. He probably wouldn't have done that if the real thing actually happened. A guy named Kim Philby became a Russian mole and rose to the top of British intelligence and Russian counterintelligence, incredibly, through World War II in the early 60s, and then got away. And it's amazing how many people don't know about this story.
Regarded by many as possibly the most successful spy of all time, Kim Philby. This this is a 2022 miniseries called A Spy Among Friends, which is specifically the story about Kim Philby. It's available to stream on ITVX in the UK from December, Amazon Prime in Canada, and MGM Plus in the US as of the time of this recording. Mm-hmm. Please do seek it out. If you like spy stories, this one is really, really good.
But you have to pay attention, right, Todd?
Oh,
There's, it could do with a little more. I always thought, what do we call subtitles about who, when, and where. A lot of it's done in the shadows, lots flashbacks to World War II, and then flashback again or flashback up again. So you really can't be texting or doing anything else. Really
No.
And as I've said to Todd, I read the book and I was lost sometimes. Recently read the book.
I have a feeling that we're going to spend more time just actually untangling exactly what the story here is than even criticizing the tradecraft. And honestly, I mean, as far as critiquing the tradecraft, there's not that much to criticize here. But this is a work of dramatic fiction, but it's based on a biography, which was written by, Ben McIntyre in 2015, bestseller. Yep. It's called A Spy Among Friends, Kim Philby and the Great Betrayal. He has written numerous books detailing famous spy stories from history, yes, and he's frequently praised for the fact that his historical accounts read like thrillers. So, would you agree with that,
yes.
Fred? Did you like the book?
I've read some of his other books too. Almost
all of the characters in this miniseries, which, by the way, is a 6-episode miniseries with no further episodes planned. It's all done. Almost all the characters are based on real-life people with their real names. The most notable exception is one of the main characters, Lily Thomas.
Who's great. He's a composite.
Yeah. She plays the MI5 agent who is assigned to debrief Nicholas Elliott, a friend of Kim Philby's. She's fictional. Also, some of the events, notably this one little subplot, is, as far as I can tell, totally ahistorical. Didn't happen in the book, but they added it in the miniseries. We'll flag that when we get to it. So, more nuts and bolts of the series. The featured agencies here, the primary ones are the British SIS and MI5, with CIA and KGB also involved. SIS is the British Secret Intelligence Service. This is what I see, as at least as an American, more commonly referred to in modern times as MI6. They first started referring to themselves as MI6 at the start of World War II, even though the SIS had, already been in existence. It probably dates back to World War I at least.
Yeah.
Currently, it seems that at least in Britain, the two terms are interchangeable.
Yeah, the M1, the MI stood for military intelligence.
Okay, excellent. And as we always say, the MI5, MI6 generally corresponds to our American FBI and CIA, respectively. Uh, I see a lot of friction, a lot of class friction, I would call it, in
Big,
the
big time. Yep. Yep.
between MI5 and MI6
And
in
and
this
let's take the
show.
analogy even further. Same thing, I would argue, between the FBI and the CIA. All right.
Describe it.
FBI in this country was more like Italian Irish former cops, right? More blue collar, right?
Mhm.
And compared to the Ivy League CIA, the Dulleses of the world, that so you see that same chasm, that same class split over here as you did over there.
Right. The CIA famously founded drawing on elite youth from like Princeton and Harvard kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
if I remember the story right. So yeah,
Yep.
definitely highlighting some class differences here, which I thought was really interesting. Really interesting. But yeah, Lily is definitely, though, she is Nick's equal, I would say, in terms of playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little, I'm going to say I was a little confused at first about the actors playing Flora Solomon and Jane Sismore. Do you know the two characters I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Flora Solomon being another friend of Kim Philby's. Jane Sismore is an MI5 lady that's sitting in on the debriefings with Lily. At first, I thought it was the same person.
Mm-hmm.
There's another actor. There's another actor that plays Philby's girlfriend or love interest, let's say, in flashbacks, and the Russian agent in Moscow that's watching him. They also look really similar. I have actually not yet decided if I think that's supposed to be the same person, because we never hear the Russian lady's name, and she's German in both cases. She's not Russian.
He's the one she married to get her out of the country
Right, right.
during World War II.
So I just would say in both of those cases, I think the casting department could have maybe done a little better job to differentiate the characters. Other actors in here, Damian Lewis. I talked about him before when Dave and I did our episode on Homeland. I remember being kind of unimpressed with Damian Lewis at the time. Man, oh man, he brings it in this show. Did you see Homeland?
Yeah, but we were introduced to him for, I don't know if you've ever seen the series Band of Brothers. That was his first big role where he played the officer of all those brothers.
I
Did you
did not.
see that?
I did not watch that. Is he good in
Okay.
that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's when he first came on the scene, and that's what I think people will forever remember him as.
Okay. I'm gonna remember him for this. What I think is going on there. This is my suspicion. In Homeland, remember, he plays a kind of you know, um, a broken man, a man who is
Mhm.
very shut down, and a man who we're supposed to wonder whether or not he's been turned by the not. It's not the Taliban. God, I'm stupid today. Al Qaeda. And so he's very much keeping all his emotions in. So I think he just didn't have much to do with the character in terms of being expressive. But I think he's a fantastic actor now.
But here's another thing with me. The book has pictures of Philby, right, and Elliot. And I thought for sure when I saw the previews, I thought for sure Philby was going to be played by Damian Lewis, and Guy Pearce would have been Elliot.
I agree.
Because did you see the pictures?
The same thing happened to me.
Do you know what I mean?
We talked
Okay.
about it. We talked about it.
Okay. Well, I didn't know you agreed with that. I kept thinking, and then once I started watching it, I kept thinking that the one was the other, until finally I had to slap myself out of it. Because if they were just going on looks alone, Philby looked more like Damian Lewis, and the other way around, Elliot and Pierce. So I had trouble with that.
We have talked, not you and me necessarily. You and me have talked a lot about Kim Philby. not necessarily on this podcast. In the old days, we have talked about other movies that featured Kim Philby. He was played by Tom Hollander in our discussion about The Company, which is a 2007 miniseries, and by Billy Crudup in our discussion of The Good Shepherd, which was a 2006 film. Both stories were from an American-centric view in which Kim Philby's character was just very much like kind of off to the side. He was just like a subplot. But this is definitely a story about Kim Philby that we have here, which is something you have been asking for, right?
Yeah.
And they exist, Fred. I looked. There are other movies about Kim Philby. You can find them.
Right. I will remember once we started digging, but they weren't necessarily, that great to jump up and down about. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong.
You describe Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy as being kind of you think Correa was.
It was the fictional, and what I think is funny is that I don't think he would have, even the great John le Carre could have ever, because I've always said, if any fictionalized author, le Carre or others, came up with this plot, it would be handed back by the editor saying, no, this is too over the top, right? So I don't even think he would have dreamed that plot up if it didn't already happen with Philby. Because it's so incredible that it happened. And then we find out the main theme, without giving, and this doesn't, but that we touched on it a little bit. That good old boy, arrogant, British, stiff upper lip, even beyond, they couldn't imagine, even though there were clues in hindsight, they couldn't imagine anyone, especially anyone as charismatic as Philby, would dream of taking a different path. And that's the thing. Everything I've read about Philby, as much as I'm sure once he got to Moscow, he missed, the creature comforts of life, let alone the long lines in the gum department. He was a hardcore communist believer. And see, here's another thing that the problem I have with the series. I don't think the writers would accept that. I think that's the great irony. I think the writers of this series invented that whole Angleton in Moscow and turning him into a third agent because they couldn't even conceive that somebody could be a hardcore ideological communist that didn't have anything to do with money or a love trap. That's the irony. This whole thing talks about the arrogance of the British upper crust who couldn't imagine this happening and then let him go. And I think that the writers were guilty of that same thing because they couldn't imagine it. Or I was talking to my wife about this. She made the point. She said, or they didn't think the viewers would accept it. That somebody could be this.
Right. I want to hold off on. I have thoughts on this. I want to hold off on them until we get there. For my thoughts personally, but I agree with you absolutely. He was hiding in plain sight at the highest level. In short, he was an SIS officer who secretly worked for the KGB between World War II and 1963. In 1963, after being unmasked, he fled to defected to the USSR. He wasn't an SIS agent at that time, though. There was a point, which we're going to have to talk about when he kind of has to resign. But so there's a period of time where he's actively an SIS officer working for the KGB. But then afterwards, he's a journalist in Beirut, but he's still working for the KGB for years before he gets unmasked.
And then that's where Elliot keeps dangling well, there's still hope. If you come clean, you can come home and get your pension, and right.
That's right. I really like the characterization of the characterizations in this show. I think Nick, like again, Damian Lewis, really good. I think he's so good at being like very clever with his wordplay and jokes, and always seeming to not really take things seriously, and having this little air of like, oh yeah, like haha, but I know stuff you don't know, and I'm above your level. But what's funny, I think about it, is it's a sort of thing where he thinks he's getting away with it, but really smart people can totally see through him. And I love how
What
Lily,
did that one woman who you were confused with? She said that Kim once said something about him to that, everybody thinks, or he puts on these airs of not being in touch, but he's on all the time, something along those lines. I thought I wrote it down. One of those women that you said that you were.
yes, Laura Solomon said that Kim said that about Nick.
Yeah.
But
that he was on. He was on, I guess something like he was on more than he let on to be.
Right. So while Nick's sense of humor is kind of snide and off-putting and a little elevated, Kim's sense of humor is much more warm and flattering. Like, Kim draws you in by being funny. Nick kind of puts you off, puts a wall in between you, but Kim has this sense of humor that like draws you in. And I almost kind of think that Nick was like just trying to that he admired Kim's ability to be clever and put people at ease, and that he thinks that's what he's doing, but he's not. He's just not as good at it as
both he and Angleton are swept up with his charisma, and they're wannabes. They try too hard, and they're not. They just don't have Kim's charisma.
Right. With Nick, humor is like a deflection, and with Kim, it's an invitation to be his friend. And then Angleton, in the when we see them all together, he almost seems like just like kind of a little bit of a nerdy third wheel.
He was a weirdo. He really went in once this whole thing blew up. He went paranoid. He started purging people in the CIA. They finally let him go. He got obsessed with his orchids. He had this big greenhouse of orchids. He's the one that came up with the wilderness of mirrors, which is a common spy term.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that very wilderness of mirrors drove him nuts, especially after Kim, because he looked for a spy under everybody's bed after that.
Yes, that's correct. We're doing I just really think there's so much material here. We're doing this one a little different. We're just going to talk about the first 3 episodes tonight. We're going to do the other 3 episodes next month. I think it's going to be worth it. So some of the things here we'll not be able to resolve, and some of them we probably shouldn't try to discuss in too much detail.
Retinal scan complete. Validating security clearance. Clearance granted. You may now enter the briefing room.
Okay, so first and overall, because this show runs through multiple narratives and it does cut back and forth quite quickly. I think too quickly in a lot of cases. I think. I
told you I read the book and I had trouble following it.
Yeah, I think the editors could switch to decaf maybe.
Yeah.
But so at the very beginning, okay, so this is just the overall overview of the structure. At the very beginning, MI5 has finally figured out Philby, and with Flora Solomon's testimony sealing the deal. She is a friend of Philby's. In fact, she's the one that introduced him to his wife. She's also a friend of Nick's. They all know each other. Nick from SIS is dispatched to Beirut to try to talk Philby into coming in. They'll have 4 days of conversation in an SIS safe house that is, of course, bugged, and everything's being recorded, after which Philby defects. Lily of MI5, this is our fictional character, although I'm sure someone from MI5 debriefed Nick, right? She's assigned to, ask Nick basically what happened in Beirut, and further, what happened through this whole you were friends for 25 years. Are we really supposed to believe you didn't know? And also, how long do you think Philby was actually a spy? They don't know that yet.
Well, and I think Nick knows, but he knows how important it is for the Americans' ear to hear that it was just up to World War II, because he knows the Americans would raise holy hell and want a piece of Philby if it was after World War II, because that meant he would be spying on them as well.
Right.
So that was important. Nick knew that in those recorded sessions, he was very careful to say, yes, he was spying up until 45 when the war was over, because he knew that the Americans would raise holy hell. Right. And he admits that to her later on when they talk without the microphone on.
So yes, and also Nick is under suspicion here. For all they know, he could have been working with Philby this whole time. I mean, after all, he argued very vociferously to be sent to Beirut to try to talk Philby into coming in, and he comes back empty-handed. Doesn't look good for Nick.
Well, they also throw in the caveat. Was her name Lily?
Lily,
the composite. Yeah. She doesn't necessarily think he's a spy, but she just thinks he's desperate to salvage his career. In other words, what does he get from him? He's got to get something from it rather than the chicken feed that he does get. Right. The few pieces of paper that he writes. She feels that, career-wise, he needs to go back to London with something. And then that's where the speculation about the double agent stuff comes in, and then going out on the balcony.
The deal is supposed to be Nick is going to offer Kim immunity and a quiet retirement in return for a full confession of everything that he did for the Russians. And of course, now he does come back with a signed confession. But as you say, Lily dismisses it as chicken feed. Chicken feed is the spy term for, just garbage intelligence. It's kind of meant to look authentic, but it's not. And over on the other side of things, after Beirut, Philby is being interrogated by his KGB handler, who has pretty much the same questions and suspicions about what happened in Beirut. He's also looking at the situation and saying, how did you get away so easily? Why did
Nick let you go? Right. And that view from the balcony, they knew that the Russians would be watching that, so they want to put a question in their head there about what did they talk about on the balcony. In other words, are we talking about, triple agent stuff? So that was their consumption too. That appearance on the balcony between the two of them also had the Russians suspicious of what was going on.
Yes. Everyone wants to know what happened in Beirut, and especially everyone wants to know what happened on the balcony, because there's this one part in Beirut where they stepped and just for 3 minutes they had a conversation on the balcony which was not recorded. Now, the series splits off into all these multiple narratives. The precise content of the 4-day conversations that Nick and Philby had in Beirut are spread out through the entire series. We don't get to see it all at once. Then there's the present day following Nick as he reacts to Philby's defection and the mistrust of himself as he's being interrogated by MI5, following Philby in Russia as he's being interrogated by the Russians and getting used to his new life. Both of these are peppered with flashbacks pertaining to their 25 history friendship. Then there's also the story of Lily as she's trying to figure out if Nick's story holds up. James Angleton is going to come on the scene. He's going to get his own scenes as well. Mercifully, Lily and James Angleton don't also get flashbacks.
Yeah.
So the story's only split up into, 1, 2, 3, 4, just five sections that we just keep jumping back and forth between. I think it's very good. You had told me, you had warned me before I got a chance to start watching it. That's pretty tough to follow. And I got to the end of the first episode and I said, hold on, I'm going to start over. I don't think I know what's going on.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, by paying diligent attention on my second go through, I think I got it all.
It helps too to have those plot synopses handy, that you can get online. That's what I do. I get those plot synopsises, and they're pretty general, but sometimes I pick up things.
And as you said, doesn't hurt to watch this one with the subtitles on. Really kind of helps.
Yeah, I do. Helps my note taking.
Yeah. So there's the overview. Let's talk about what we know about Beirut from the three episodes we watched. As we said, Nick has convinced Britain to let him go and try to bring Philby in. Philby agrees to an invitation to an SIS safe house in Beirut where he's surprised. Well, I mean, he didn't know it was going to be Nick there, but he says, "Oh, somehow I thought it would be you."
Mm-hmm.
And it's here that Nick tells Philby, "Okay, you've been blown. We got 4 days to try to talk you in." And
Right. And better me than M15. M15 wanted to, tear you to pieces, playing kind of the good cop to M15's bad cop.
right. But what's really critical to understand here at all times is that both Nick and Kim are master spies. They have to, in every scene you're in, you have to be considering that both of them absolutely understand that their conversations are not entirely private. They both know they could be being observed or listened to by any number of interested parties of any time. And so the context of their conversations might look to one observer like betrayal and to another observer as just maintaining my cover.
Well, which begs the question why Philby thought that chicken feed on paper would pass any muster.
Yeah.
If they're both super spies, they would have seen through that and did, right?
If the whole idea between him and Nick is that Nick just, and on behalf of SIS, is just trying to keep a fig leaf on this, it's important that at least there is this 8 pages of confessions from Philby, even if they're all bullshit. You have to have something to point to.
There's the thing. Any reasonable person who was looking for a way out would have taken that fig leaf and offer from Elliot, which leads you to, it's more ammunition that Philby was hardcore communist.
Now that does seem to be the case. So their conversations are a very delicate dagger dance between the two men. They have a 25-year friendship between them, which means that there are a lot of nuances that they could, be talking about, things that they could mention to each other, ways that they could phrase things that only they would understand the meaning of between the two of them. And the people that are observing them, both on the Western and the Eastern side, they're aware of that too. There are no babes in the woods, so to speak, in this series.
The big reference when he threw out there and made an analogy, Philby, of himself to Jesus, Elliot said, "You can't be comparing yourself to Jesus," right? So that he didn't catch that, but Angleton did.
Right. Yeah. Right.
He threw that. If we're to believe the writers on that, he didn't catch that. And and Lily did. The Jesus referenced.
Yes.
Right? That was a signal to Angleton that I'm ready to be turned.
She is picking up on every little tiny thing. We gotta talk. I'll mention it now. Just right from the beginning, I like this. The very first thing Kim Philby says when he sees Nick at the safe house in Beirut is, "I rather thought it might be you." Boom! She stops the tape and starts asking him, what did he mean by that? I love it. She is gonna leave no stone unturned, right? She is going into a deep analysis. I don't think Nick quite realizes when he begins his interrogation just how diligent.
He tries to geographically pinpoint her to Northumberland, by her accent. In other words, put her in her place,
Put her in her place, yeah.
Kind of a thing, but she puts him in place.
Class, bitch. You don't interrogate me.
Right. I detect is it a northern accent, Northumberland? And then she tells him whatever it is after a bit. Yeah, that British snobbery throughout the whole thing.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah,
I think there's a reason British dramas are so popular. So I want to go through and make sure we're totally clear on what each agency has access to as far as direct intelligence of what happened in Beirut. Now, Nick and Kim, obviously, they both know exactly what they talked about, even though Kim will pretend that he doesn't remember some of it, which is very implausible. SIS, I assume that the safe house was SIS. I assume that it's properly bugged except for the balcony, and that SIS has all the recordings of their conversations, and that SIS knows everything that Nick knows. Do you think Nick is holding anything back from SIS? We don't really see them in the show much.
No.
Do you think he's holding anything back from SIS, or do you think he's
only
playing?
Only whatever he wants to bring back to save his career. You know what I'm saying? Like Lily said. You know,
Okay.
and I'm not sure what that would be. If it would be just bring him back, or the whole thing about turning him. I don't know. But yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. That he's more interested in saving his career.
MI5. We know that MI5 has access to all the recordings from Beirut, except of course for the balcony. And boo on whoever bugged the place for not, I don't know, bugging the. Oh, but actually, there's a thing that'll come up. We can't talk about it
Yeah.
right now. There's actually a
Yeah.
reason the balcony.
Yeah.
In later episodes, we might find more information about that. To me, it appears that KGB was aware of the Beirut meetings and that they were observing the hotel from outside, but doesn't have access to any recordings. And of course, they have, whatever Kim told them. CIA is not aware of the Beirut meetings in real time. However, notice that at times Nick will lie, I think. He'll tell Lily that he assumed the CIA was listening. I don't know if he believed that or not, but it doesn't seem like they were. It doesn't seem like they were aware of the Beirut meeting until later. But sometimes it can be useful if you're lying to this person about what you said to this person. You could say that I only said that because I assumed that this other person was listening.
Well, that was exactly what Elliot had in mind about the World War II thing. He was protecting the British Secret Service when he said that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the Americans thought that Philby was active after World War II, they would have been all over the British Secret Service. So he was protecting the British Secret Service with that from the Americans.
Yes.
When he said that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an example of what you're talking about.
There's a 3-minute long blank spot in the Beirut meetings near the end of the 4th day, right before Philby's defection. They have a short conversation on the balcony that is not recorded by anyone but was observed by the KGB. And that content of that conversation, by the way, is not revealed to us, the audience, in this first 3 episodes, so we are not going to talk about it in this episode. You'll have to wait till next month. That is Beirut. Let's talk about Nick and Lily in what we'll call the current day of 1963. This is immediately after Philby's defection. I struggle to find bad tradecraft in this series, but I'll put a little quick quibble right here. She's got this beautiful tape machine in the briefing room, and she only ever uses it to play back audio from Beirut. Shouldn't she be recording the debriefing? As I said, at first I think Nick thinks he's just going to breeze through this, but she pretty quickly puts him on notice that she's not having any of his bullshit and that she's going to, like I said, leave no stone unturned. She's not only going to grill him about Beirut, but about everything about his relationship to Philby, starting with how they first met, which is a great storytelling technique because this way we get to, explore the entire 25 years of their history through flashbacks.
Well, a good example too is the whole thing with Flora. He goes into great detail about the World War II Nazi stuff and literally says, why didn't you just say you were having an affair? Why did you have to describe the whole Austria business regarding Litzy when he could have just said it was an affair? To which Nick says, he was probing to see what I knew, obviously. To which Lily says, obviously? You mean in retrospect? So she's all over that too.
Mm-hmm. You know, I wish I had written down in my notes. Maybe you remember, but like, okay, I keep describing that. Like, again, he thinks it's going to be kind of smooth sailing. He's starting to realize that he's maybe in more trouble than he realized. Something she said, some part of the conversation, he has a panic attack. Pretty much, he has to excuse himself, stumbles to the bathroom. One of my principles, one of all my principles of one of my most important principles of analyzing spy movies, because a lot of times the characters are saying things they don't mean, but watch what they do when they're alone. When they know they're not being observed, that's when you get to see their true selves. In this panic attack, and I guess the fact he forgot to take his insulin or something that he does in the bathroom reveals to us that he is truly something. The weight of this situation is really crushing in on him. So at least something is not going according to his plan. He confesses to Lily. Now, when she asks him about motivation, communism stuff, like why did Philby do it? He tells her that intelligence work in the SAS can be, I think he uses the word intoxicating. It can really be a thrill to lie directly to someone's face and get away with it. And he suggests that Philby's game, double-sided play, being a double agent, must have been, you know, doubly as intoxicating, especially when, as you say, like he's lying to like some of the people that think they are the smartest people in the world, and he's pulling it off. Which is where I'm gonna go later too, when with Philby in Moscow. I think he still really wants to play the game. I think that's a sad part where I feel actually kind of sad for Philby. How do you like these characters, by the way? That's a good question to ask. Do you find any sympathy or empathy for Philby, or do you just really hate him?
No, I actually I admire the fact that it's pure ideology. It's not a honey trap. It's not for money. He is a true believer. And this is something that not only his friends couldn't get through their heads, but I maintain the writers either. That
Yeah,
he wasn't ready to be turned. He didn't give a signal to Angleton to be a triple agent, you know? And I admire the fact that he's a true believer. So, yes, the real life Philby, yeah. Not the guy in the series that they suggest could be turned. But in the book and in real life, I admire.
I do end up feeling sad for him. But it's interesting, you know, like that's something that's true as well about talking about spy movies is anytime we talk about a real life spy story, it always ends badly for the spy. Because if they didn't get caught, we wouldn't know the story, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so we don't have any great true to life spy stories where the
look
spy
at the irony of this
got
one.
away with everything scot free.
Look at the iron. Look how long it took to get this one out, and you know, like you suggest, it came out in dribs and drabs in some movies and some miniseries, and then a fictionalized version of it. But I think part of the reason why a lot of people don't know about it is how freaking embarrassing the whole thing was.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, the book suggests that he was allowed to easily escape in Beirut because they didn't want to go through the trial and the embarrassment of it. Not that they were trying to turn him, right? Which is a great plot point, but didn't happen. But the embarrassment of it. Let him go.
What was the show or movie that we talked about? It was the one with Keira Knightley,
Official Secrets.
Official Secrets,
Yeah.
where the news guy goes and talks. He's worried about what they're allowed to publish, you know, because he's learning some stuff that might be sensitive to the government. And there's a certain act in Britain that says, you know, that talks about what you can and cannot publish.
Right.
regarding
Right.
national secrets. And he goes to consult with this one guy who's supposed to be like the expert arbiter on that matter. And the guy basically tells him, like, look, the golden rule here is there's a million different reasons that newspapers should not publish government secrets, but preventing the government from being embarrassed isn't fucking one of
Right.
them.
And most every cover up from the British to Watergate has been mostly embarrassment, not national secrets being jeopardized. It's been embarrassment from that administration.
Embarrassment is a very powerful motivating factor of human psychology, for absolute sure. And I'm sure the huge, like, public embarrassment too, when you're a public official, you have this huge public profile, that's got to be massively crushing. You probably
Look at the torture report. Look at the embarrassment with the renditioning, the torturing, the euphemisms that went on there, and how Bush tried to distance himself from that with Condoleezza Rice, and it's mostly embarrassment.
So what I will say about the balcony as regards to Nick and Lily, she's obviously going to press him on it. What did you guys talk about on the 3 minutes? Why did you take him on the balcony where we couldn't hear what was going on? Nick's counter here is that he knew the KGB were watching and he wanted them to see him and Philby together. On its face, this is a good reason. If he is advertising to the KGB that the two of them are having private conversations, this would give KGB more reason to, and this works. It does make the KGB more distrustful of Philby, which Philby, of course, would know that, which would give Philby more incentive to take Nick up on his deal. Mm-hmm. Nice and neat, good spy points there. Here's my quibbles. First off, fire the person who didn't wire the balcony for sound, if this is the case. Second, Nick didn't have any way to know that the balcony was not rigged for sound. Third, Lily should know that Nick couldn't know that the balcony wasn't rigged for sound. Mm-hmm. The fact that she lets him know, now this is bad tradecraft here. She lets him know that. She lets him know that they don't know what they talked about on the balcony for that 3 minutes. I think that's bad tradecraft and possibly the worst. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? He doesn't need to know that she doesn't know what they talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All
right.
Yeah.
After the first day of their interrogation, it becomes clear that Nick's wife. Oh, right. Yeah. So after the first day, there are going to be multiple days of interrogation. He's not being held or anything. He's going home to his wife. He's still leading his normal life outside of the business day of what they need to talk about. It becomes clear in the series that Nick's wife knows about Philby's betrayal and defection. I wanted to look into that a little because I was thinking, like, hey, why are you telling your wife this?
Did you see what I said?
Oh, tell me what you said.
She was up to her eyeballs in that whole Vermilion affair, right? She and Nick staged that Vermilion defection to the British from the Nazis during the war as a kidnapping by the British Secret Service at that Istanbul nightclub. So she was up to her eyes and then became, I guess, his secretary or someone. But she was involved in that whole Vermilion affair. And that's why she got the clue when Elliot asked her to set up so he could be at that Buckingham Palace art gallery, right? So when he heard him deliberately say Vermeer as Vermeeren to Anthony Blunt to see if it had the intended effect, Elizabeth knew. Remember when they went to dinner? She said, "You said that on purpose," because she knew about the Vermeerian affair.
Okay.
So she knew the whole thing.
Do you think she has security clearance?
At that point, I don't know, but
okay,
she was an active agent and into that huge Vermilion affair.
Okay.
by spiriting him out of the country. You know, that one
Inter-
flashback to the war?
Interesting. Okay. So I'm not sure about that, but I did do my little research on like what you're allowed to tell your spouse if you're SIS. The
Yeah, but
current
it's
policy.
moot for her. That whole thing is moot for her because she was into it up to her eyeballs.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? For maybe anybody else, but she was an active agent way back in World War II and knew about the whole affair, knew about Philby.
How does she know about Philby? I'm sorry. Help me out here.
She was involved with the whole Vermilion affair, which was blown by Philby. She
I don't think
spirited him out of the country.
Okay. Yeah. I'll say this though. I don't think she is in a need to know situation here.
Like
Also, like,
he probably figured, you know, with her, she knows everything anyway, so was probably felt free to talk with her about those things because she
I
knew so much and was part of the whole organization.
I
So
accept
I
that.
don't think. I mean, I can understand what you're saying, but I don't think she's a good example of it.
Okay. Okay.
You know,
Totally accept what you're saying is totally valid counter argument, but I still want to make my case. I'm not going to try to convince you that you're mistaken. I think you could totally be right, but I still just want to make the counter case if I can. You particularly have been keying in on the fact of how very embarrassing this whole situation could be.
mm-hmm.
And I think Nick shouldn't be talking to anyone that he doesn't absolutely have to. And of course, maybe he just has that kind of relationship with his wife. I mean, apparently he does. I just want to flag it as questionable. Like right here today, like within days, and
Yeah.
like doesn't even really know what's going on, and the embarrassment factor and everything.
I agree with you with any Jane Doe wife. Yeah, but
But you're saying
it's
she's
moot with her because she
particular
was
case. Okay.
an active agent with him and knew the whole story. And she even remember when they were at dinner and she got when he tried to trip up Blunt with that saying that Vermeer wrong.
Uh-huh.
She knew damn well what he was doing.
Well, she knew. I mean, I'll give you. She knows he's up to something.
Yeah, but she was involved in that whole affair by getting him out of the country.
Okay.
That was
Failing
a
to
pretty
get
action oriented scene too. You know, they staged it as a kidnapping at that Istanbul nightclub. Do you remember that scene?
Oh my god! Staging a kidnapping.
Of Vermeer.
Oh yeah.
That was Elliot and his wife Elizabeth getting him out. And remember, he had getting him out.
Now I'm just starting to think she's straight up is an SIS agent.
Yeah.
That he's married to. Okay. All right. Excellent. The debriefing continues. Lily presses into the affairs of Nick, Flora Solomon, and Eileen Philby. That is Philby's wife. In flashbacks, we find out that Eileen had started to pick up on Philby's odd behavior, which often, if you're a spy and you don't want your wife to know, it can be beneficial in some relationships to have them think that you're having an affair. But often, if you're a spy, that's what it might look like to your spouse. They might, if you're a spy doing spy stuff and your spouse notices that something's going on, they're usually going to guess affair before they guess spy, right?
Well, she splits hairs, though. She claims he was a communist without being a Russian spy.
Who's
right?
she?
Because
which she are you talking about?
Flora? Are we talking about Flora?
Okay, Flora,
yeah,
yes.
Flora. Now, the Cambridge Five, everybody knew. I mean, they knew, but so many of the British, it's just, that's youth, just youthful. They everybody. I think they said that in one of the conversations. Everybody experimented in communism, and remember, it wasn't such a big stigma. But she always believed that Kim remained one. right? And the rest of the British co-workers just thought, oh, that was just a dalliance he had as a youthful indiscretion. But she splits hairs by saying, I never thought he was a Russian spy, but I thought he was, sympathetic communist.
Right. So
Flora.
here's what happened though. Eileen, Philby's wife, started to suspect him of having an affair. Flora
Right.
kind of takes that. It seems to me that she takes that as an opportunity that she actually maybe does in the back of her mind suspect that Philby might be a spy.
And puts it in Elliot's head. And Lily kind of thinks that even Elliot, under the guise of spying for the affair, she was saying, weren't you also kind of thinking maybe there was more to it than the affair when you were spying on him? Remember, Lily picked up on that too.
Right.
So yeah.
So I think it's plus spy points all around for Flora for she doesn't want to say to Nick like, hey, I think your best friend might be a spy, but when she does get this opportunity to uh,
With
kind of
the affair.
entrap him into following Philby around surreptitiously and seeing what he's up to, she's not saying it out loud, but
No.
she is secretly like hoping, like, God, I hope it is an affair.
Yeah, under the guise of helping Philby's wife.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think it gets even better because so Lily is totally like keyed in on this, and like you said, she's like, "Wait a second, are you sure you didn't think he was a spy?" Blah blah blah. So now she puts all these thoughts into his head about this Flora Solomon character, and then they break for lunch, and a little while later, someone comes in at the end of lunch. Someone comes in to tell Nick that like, oh, she took off for the rest of the day. She had some business to do. What's her real play here, Fred? You want to tell us?
She wants Nick to then go to Flora's, and then she'll monitor it.
Yeah. Instead of going to lunch, she immediately went out and called in a surveillance van and parked across from Flora Solomon's house, and he totally falls for it. I think this is such great tradecraft. Plus spy points. Might be one of the best pieces of tradecraft I've seen.
That was it's my number one. I put it down as my number one. Lily's decision to bug Flora's house after she put seeds of doubt into Nick's head about her and deliberately does not return to SIS to give Elliot time to visit Flora so she can eavesdrop on them. That was my number one tradecraft.
Mm-hmm. So he does go and talk with Flora, and Lily gets to hear this entire conversation from across the street in the van, and she ascertains the stuff that we talked about. Nick's visit with Flora is what makes him realize that Litzy, the suspected mistress of Kim Philby, was actually his KGB contact.
Handler, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Philby met Litzy. Litzy's a German Jew, I believe. I think she's German national, but oh wait, no, now I'm confused. Is she German? He meets her in Germany. But she's fighting for the resistance. So maybe she's not German. Maybe she's Jewish or French. I wasn't sure. That might clarify it as to whether or not it's the same character that Philby meets again in Moscow. But they both do. They both have the exact same haircut, and they're kind of the same type of looking woman. So yeah, and you had the note. Lily asked Nick the important question: why Philby tells him all that background business in Austria. Oh, right, when he could have just said it was an affair.
Yeah.
All right. During this time, again, other people are interested. Now, this actually seems like a coincidence, but master spies don't believe in coincidence, right, Fred?
Right.
Michael Whitney Straight, over in the U.S. of A. Michael Whitney Straight, another member of the Cambridge Five, comes in voluntarily and confesses to the Americans. MI5 correctly notices that this is very suspicious timing. Do you have anything to say on this timing? Do you know
Is it,
why Straight comes in at this point in time?
no. But he gives Blunt, right? Isn't that where we hear about Blunt?
He will. He will. Yeah, he will finger Blunt.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. I'm guessing somehow he caught wind of. Maybe Philby sent him a message, or I don't know. Maybe somehow he got caught. He got wind that Philby was blown, and if he knows that Philby knows him, he believes that Philby is going to finger him, and so he might as well come in, voluntarily instead of waiting for them to knock on his door. So this definitely lets MI5 know that the CIA is aware of the situation. And Lily is informed that James Angleton has set up an observation post near Nick's home. Here's a little gripey minus spy points thing. They show her a picture of James Angleton in his observation post. How did they get that picture, Fred?
Don't ask me because the whole thing never happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you not think? Okay, I know that the Russia stuff that's going to happen later didn't happen
No,
in
I don't think
reality.
Angleton. I don't think Angleton was in England
Oh, really?
during that time. Yeah,
That's made
I
up
don't
too?
remember that. I don't remember
Was
that
that
in the book.
was that in? Is Angleton even a main character in the book?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But
I don't think
mostly.
he sets up shop in England.
Okay. All right. Um, Nick takes opportunity. So they go to one evening. They go to an art show. Sir Anthony Blunt, by the way, he's not intelligence. I mean, at least that's not his cover. He is in fact another member of the Cambridge Five. But he's not he's not SIS. He's not MI5. He's just this art historian.
Yeah, and Blunt introduces Her Majesty's to Roger Hollis of M15,
Mm-hmm.
which caught my eye because he would later come under suspicion as being the sixth man in the book
Right.
Spycatcher.
Right. At least in the first, I'll just say this: at least the first 3 episodes of this show, we don't get any indication that Sir Roger Hollis is a double agent. And again, historically or based on Wiki, anyways, it looks like he wasn't. Now, I'm not sure why Nick is going after Blunt this way, except that wait, but Nick does know that Blunt was involved. So there was this situation long ago. You talked about it, where they extracted a Russian Vermeer.
Vermeer.
Vermeerhin.
It's yeah, but he mispronounces it Vermeer just to get a reaction out of Blunt.
There was a situation in the past where Nick, Philby,
and his wife Elizabeth,
and Sir Anthony Blunt were all involved in an attempted defection of a Russian over to the West. Now, as we'll find out, Philby fucked that guy over.
Yeah. That was because on the one hand, the guy was anti-Nazi because he was Catholic because of his Catholicism, but that made him also anti-Russian. So that's why Philby fingered him, and you had that scene with the buses.
Yes.
Right.
So my thinking here is that it's Nick thinking back through his history of Kim Philby, thinking about the operations that they ran together, thinking about this particular one that maybe Nick thinks should have gone smoothly, and only now he's questioning, wait a second, what happened? Did Philby fuck that guy over? which we know that he did as the audience. So,
Yeah.
but maybe Nick is just wondering about it, and he's thinking, okay, how do I figure that out? He thinks, well, who else was involved in that operation? He says, Sir Anthony Blunt. So what happens if I go and Sir Anthony Blunt, if Anthony Blunt is a spy and an associate of Philby's, he would know about Philby's defection. He would be on edge. And if I mention this operation to him, what's his reaction going to be? And so that's what he does. He and that's super clever. They're talking about the artist Vermeer.
Yeah.
He accidentally says Vermeeren,
Yeah.
and then he pretends he doesn't know what he said.
Right.
So it does noticeably shake Blunt. Lily, who's also in attendance, notices that as well. And as you said, Elizabeth, his Nick's wife, also notices. After that situation at the art gallery, Lily confronts Nick about Angleton, and they have a heart-to-heart in his basement, where I guess he thinks he can't be heard. He explains Vermeeren to her. He explains all the stuff that we just talked about, and he tells her Blunt was in on it. Simultaneously, we as the audience see that Straight is fingering Blunt to the FBI, so we know as the audience, Blunt is bad. And you know, and of course, you know, Angleton knows about it as well, because Angleton is getting all the information that the FBI is getting. She tries to get close to Nick with a late night visit to his apartment. He's open to her sideline advances for them to see the things the same way. Now, MI5 is not happy that CIA is involved, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to avoid that. Philby is the enemy, CIA is the enemy, KGB is the enemy. Can't MI5 and SIS be friends in this situation? Friend or foe? Nick's wife asks him regarding Lily. He answers, she has potential. So he tells her the whole Vermeeren story. He credits Philby greatly with changing the course of World War II. He's basically telling her he's figured out that Philby betrayed Vermeeren and that Blunt is probably in on it. So that's what he's doing. He's scaring her about the idea that there are more Philbys out there, and that it's more important for them to band together against, you know, other people that might be, you know, bad seeds, and especially to band together against the American. Right. So I always say that in a TV series, it's usually the midpoint where things change dramatically. At this point, what's happened in the story is that Nick and Lily have gone from being completely like antagonistic to each other to possibly being willing to cooperate a little. So that's Nick and Lily. Let's talk about what's going on with Philby over in Russia. He's being debriefed by Brontov. As we said before, the KGB are looking at the Beirut situation. They have all the same suspicions for all the same reasons. The signed confession, the chicken feed, the doubts about what was talked about on the balcony. They also have questions about Guy Burgess and Donald MacLeod. These are two members of the Cambridge Five that were already blown. So if I have the timeline right, Fred, those guys were blown first. Philby was the third to...
McLean was blown. Burgess was not, but Burgess was such a drunken asshole who, you know, started fights and was a pain in the ass, decided to go with him anyway. And that pissed off Philby because he said you didn't have to go. You weren't blown. And he was the one that Philby put up in their house for a while, and he came under scrutiny for that. Boy, he dodged a bullet there because Blunt was such an idiot and drunk. They would let him stay there at his house.
Sorry, you said said Blunt, but you meant Burgess.
Yeah, I meant Burgess. Yeah. So McLean was blown and ran, but Burgess didn't have to, and ran with him.
Yes, this was in 1951. Now, at that point, Philby was a liaison in Washington, so he was also getting access to very high-level American
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah.
And he learned that Western Intel had broken some codes as part of something called the Verona Project, and he realized that what was in those codes would mean that McLean would be in trouble.
And of course, that's well after 45. Remember the whole idea of keeping Americans thinking that,
Right.
Philby was just involved up to 45, but you just said that was 51 and he was over there.
Right. Now, as you said, Burgess panics and defects along with McLean, even though he didn't need to.
Right.
The problem for Philby here is that Burgess was staying at his house at the time,
Right.
and they were known to be good friends. So Philby comes under actually very public scrutiny about whether or not he was involved in that, which of course he was.
They had that press conference in the home. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think part of the reason why Philby dodged a bullet there is because Burgess was such a known drunken, reckless asshole that a lot of that could explain that behavior.
Who was the fifth? So I just want to get the five down real quick. So of the five, McLean and Burgess are blown first. Philby is the third. Blunt will be the fourth. Who's the fifth?
No, that Philby be the fifth. Weren't they saying, aren't you the fifth man? Philby to be the fifth.
Oh, but Blunt hasn't been blown yet. And it's a guy named Cairncross. He wasn't identified until the 90s. Oh my God.
He was the fifth? Cairncross?
That's what I got from
okay. All right. And Philby's the third?
Philby's the third. Blunt will be the fourth. So wait, why isn't Cairncross considered the most successful spy of all time? He outlasted but he outlasted Philby by a quarter century.
Yeah.
Maybe he just didn't do much.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. So yeah, the KGB wants to know about that story.
Think about that, though. Think about that. That's a movie in its own, those five. But this was just taken.
Oh, absolutely.
The one guy, and just in the periphery, they mentioned the other guys. Think about that. 5, possibly 6 with Hollis. That's huge. That, I mean, it's beyond. The Philby story is incredible enough, but the fact that there were 5 of them, it's just amazing. It boggles the mind.
But that was the event. Even though Philby managed to weasel his way out of being busted for alerting McLean and accidentally Burgess, I think everyone agreed he should step down. So at that point, he's no longer a British intelligence agent. That's when he goes to Beirut as a journalist. Although he's still working for the KGB, he no longer has the high level access that he did up until 1951. So yeah, just basically like in the Philby situation, just we're seeing him step by step. He's being taken to Moscow, first on the ship and then by train. And the whole way, his KGB handler Brontov is asking him questions about this, that. I think, the KGB, even though he's been working for them all this time, at this point, they don't trust him. They don't. So they got all the same suspicions. And a pair of agents, now as he gets to Moscow, gets set up with that one creepy lady to take care of him. Sometimes I wonder if she's actually trained to kill Philby if something goes south. um, we see that a pair of agents who we don't find out right away, but it will later find out, are reporting to Angleton, are observing Philby in Moscow.
And
Most
take those codes that they talked about back in the day, or the poems, and turn them into codes to reach out to him. And Philby gave Angleton a book of poetry. And so they use that as a basis of the codes to reach out to him.
Oh, that's the significance of the book of poetry. Oh,
Yeah.
of course. And apparently Angleton fancied himself a poet.
Yeah.
He'd led edited the
But
poetry.
Elliot looked down his nose at him and said, "He's not. He's just a wannabe."
Right, but that's Nick's style. But Philby's style is to say, "Oh my God, you're kidding! You're amazing!
Right.
You're an amazing
Right.
poet." Because that's what Philby does.
Yep.
He flatters and invites.
Yeah.
Didn't mention that that name of that actor either. By the way, Guy Pearce. He's great. You talked about, and I agree with you. I agree with you that when you watch the previews, you think that the one guy is going to be playing Philby and the other guy's going to be playing Nick. But when in the end of the day, performance wise, don't you think
Yeah,
they're
they
both perfect?
Yes. Yeah, they both do a good job.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Philby in Moscow. There's going to be more exciting stuff to talk about him in the last half of the series, which we'll talk about next month. Now we've got Angleton in 1963. So again, present day. This is right after Philby's defection. Angleton is also a longtime friend of both Nick and Philby. In fact, the way the show portrays it, they were kind of like these three musketeers kind of guys, right?
Yeah.
He's got this whole time, he's got a man in London who is surveilling all the other principal characters and reporting to Angleton what's going on. The man is never known. For simplicity, I'm going to call him Russell Crowe, because if you squint, he does look like a young Russell Crowe. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. The first thing Russell Crowe sees is a quick meeting between Nick and a man that we presume, or at least Russell Crowe presumes, is Russian. They traded a newspaper. Crowe follows that guy into a church where the guy who's being followed makes a clever code switch. Did you catch that? As far as taking a tail, do you want to tell us how it works?
No, because it kind of fooled me.
The guy goes into a church. Everyone is deep in, I think the word is genuflection. And since no one's paying attention and all eyes are forward, it's a very simple matter for him to take his coat off, because people, it's shitty London weather. Everyone's got these big coats. Take his coat off, set it on the bench, pick up one of the coats that one of the parishioners dropped off, and leave out the side. Hey, code switch. Nice.
Tradecraft.
Yes, nice tradecraft. I think Crowe realized that, and he will. Let's see. The man who I think was okay. Yeah, right. So, but it wasn't a Russian. It was a guy working for Nick, and
Right.
that guy comes back and says, "Yes, I was being followed." So the guy basically that he traded a newspaper with, like, it was just basically a thing to see, like, okay, if I do this kind of like thing that, wow, what am I trying to say here? It's kind of like a brush pass, right? Where the idea is, when they trade the newspaper, the idea is that no one's going to notice that you actually passed information. But here's Nick's genius. Nick is wondering if anybody is watching him so closely that they will notice this. And if they do notice it, they'll follow the guy that I traded a newspaper with, which he does. And then that guy is also a master spy that can tell if he's being followed, and he can report back to Nick that, yes, I am being followed, and it's Angleton who's behind it, which is all really clever, good plus spy points. However, just with the one I don't understand, which is, how do they know it's Angleton that's behind it? The guy comes back to Nick, says, yeah, I'm being followed, and it's somebody, it's working for James Angleton. Total jump to conclusion. Minus spy points. But it's a total, like, minus spy points in a whole bowl of, like, awesome spy points.
Mm-hmm.
For the record, remember, and Lily knows this, knows that Angleton has set up his observation post outside of, or very close to Nick's house, and probably can hear everything that's happening inside Nick's house. Lily is on to Angleton. We did know that she got the report that Angleton is doing this stuff. She confronts him. I don't think that served any purpose except to alert Angleton that his presence has been noted and that he's being watched. Possible minus spy points for that. But there might be something I'm not getting here. I'm hoping maybe you'll be able to help me out with this. Right after she talks to Angleton, basically letting him know, we know you're in London. The next thing she does is she goes to Nick's house, which she knows that Angleton is listening to. So the only reason I can think of for her to have gone and confronted Angleton right before visiting Nick is to in a subtle way say, like, hey, asshole, you might want to listen to what I talked to Nick about. Right?
Yeah.
But in the conversation that I see with her and Nick, I don't see anything that she's providing or eliciting from Nick
Why she'd want him to know that?
That she would want Angleton to know.
Right.
So
right.
She knows that her conversation with Nick will be heard by Angleton, but Nick doesn't know that. I would call it masterful tradecraft, except I wasn't able to catch exactly what it is that she...
To what end, right?
To what end? To what end? So at the end, like, it's something I think looks like really great tradecraft, but isn't. And maybe it's just something that slipped out of the edit.
Yeah.
Now, Nick doesn't know that... Well, Nick knows that Angleton's in town, so maybe the fact he takes her down to the basement is just out of, just super precaution.
Yeah.
This is where, back to Nick and Lily, where they have their heart-to-heart. It's unclear to me if Angleton heard any of this. I'm not sure it's even important. Just want to flag it in case it comes up later. So, but what he does...
I guess not if they went down to that basement or whatever it was, right?
Well, who knows? I don't know what I don't think the show makes it clear how much of the conversation Angleton heard.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's important either.
No.
But I feel like it should be. It should have been. I just think there's something missing there. If I'm looking for flaws in this series, which I don't think there are very many, other than the fact that it's very, very complicated, that would be one of them. And wrapping up Angleton at the end of episode 3, the very last scene, I think, is we find out that he is communicating via Morse code, as you say, also using a layer of an extra layer of decryption by it being poetry passages, right? That Angleton would understand the significance of, and no one else would, or his agents in Moscow. But that's the last thing we get at the end of episode 3. Angleton finds out that Philby is reaching out to him, and
that's where they lose me, because it never happened.
And it's the last thing. It's the last thing we can talk about here, because that's really it. That's the series here. It is going to open up that final subplot in Moscow, which was not in the book, did not happen in history. We're really not sure why they put it in here, except when we get to it, I am going to have strong opinions and thoughts about it, but that'll be next month. But for right now, let me just ask you, like, that subplot that we're going to talk about next month. I know you're annoyed by the fact they included it, but did you not enjoy it just as a piece of drama?
I said it's great. It's a great plot point. Excellent.
Okay.
If this was fiction, but my point was it wasn't necessary. The story is so over the top to begin with that it didn't need any embellishment. In fact, I think it weakens the whole thing. Yeah, it's a great plot point if it was fiction. Cool, triple agent, Let's see if we can turn him now that he's there. And the whole Jesus Christ thing, using
And
it as...
if anybody has the balls to try to pull off a triple cross like this, it is Kim Philby, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's great. Great plot point.
Right. Just didn't happen. Well, Fred, that's the first 3 episodes of A Spy Among Friends, a show that I thoroughly enjoyed and look forward to watching again in the future. Mostly I think TV series, miniseries, a lot of times they're like one and done. I've seen it. I don't need to watch it again, but I do look forward to watching this one again someday.
So we're going to do the next 3 next time?
That's right.
Okay. And then possibly The Old Man.
The Old Man coming out next month. You guys know, if you've been listening to this show, me and Fred are big fans. That was one of the first ones we did together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited about that. So, this is very quickly turning into from a primarily movie discussion podcast into a TV series discussion podcast.
Well, they can fit in so much more,
They can fit in so much more, and it feels like the more realistic stuff. We get more of the realistic stuff out of TV series, I think, than movies in general. Not to say that there aren't some really, really great realistic movies out there. But Fred, thank you so much.
Glad to.
Protocol 9 initiated. This podcast will self-destruct in 20 seconds. The preceding transmission sampled the songs Ice Cold by Audionautix, Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net. Editing by Todd Hostetler.